Test, test, test. Test, test. Test, test. Oh boy. Hang with me here, guys. Sorry. My mic just shut out on me. I hope everyone can hear me at this point. Doesn't seem like my mic is currently working. This is always fun to have technical difficulties. What is going on with my mic? Test, test. All right, you got to be kidding me here. We don't like my microphone apparently today. Test, test. All right, there we go. Now we're doing a little bit better. Okay. Sorry about that technical difficulty. It doesn't look like we lost anybody in the process there. I don't know how many of you actually review or go back to the videos after I post them online, but at this point in time, looks like everything is pretty solid. Test. Okay. Are we back? Looks like we are for the time being. I'm going to keep my eye on this and make sure that everything goes as it should. Sorry about that. I'm not going to restart the live stream. If you're with us right now, thank you for going through all the technical difficulties with me. And thanks for showing up. I've gotten quite a few new followers on every platform recently, from Facebook to Instagram to X and even on YouTube here. So I want to thank everyone for following me. Makes my life a lot easier here. But yeah, thanks for following along. I've answered a lot of questions so far this weekend about fantasy football in week 10 for this week. There seems to be a common trend with some individuals that are out there as far as, do I play Rachaad White? Do I start Bucky Irving? We will get to all of those, but if you do have questions, please do go ahead and ask those questions, and I will get to them as timely as I can. As I'm sure you've noticed already, no special guest for today. Sean with Yardbarker and Total Apex Sports is otherwise preoccupied, and so is Susan with Gridiron Goddess. So hopefully we'll be able to connect with them later next week or early next week to go over all of the fantasy football subjects that we have. In the meantime, though, let's go ahead and let's get started with week 10. And we will get right into it. So if you've watched the show before, if you've listened to the fantasy football advice that I've given, I usually go through this as far as quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses. We'll go through our must starts, must sit, and your sleepers. And then when it comes to the larger category of players, running backs and wide receivers, I usually have like a no-brainer section, or a running back 1, wide receiver 1, and then you've got your running back 2 and wide receiver 2. But if you've got questions throughout the show, please feel free to ask those questions. Subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. So here we go. We are going week 10, quarterbacks and must starts. These are, again, it's kind of a no-brainer here. You're not going to not start this number 1 guy. It is Josh Allen. He is currently about 3rd or 4th as far as fantasy football quarterbacks, depending on what kind of format that you are playing in. And this week he's playing at Indianapolis. And the Indianapolis Colts give up the 4th most total yards per game and the 7th most passing yards per game. That's important to note because obviously Josh Allen can run the ball if he needs to. So they're giving up a lot of yards. Josh Allen should be able to produce quite a bit. And if we're lucky on the other side of the ball there, Flacco, the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, should be able to put up some pretty decent numbers as well. Hopefully you get into a shootout there with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. The second one that I've got, this is a little bit of a no-brainer. People are asking me about this one as well. I like Jalen Hurts this week. I get it. They're going up against Dallas, and Dallas does not have Dak Prescott this week. They're going to be starting Cooper Rush. Their running game has been suspect up until the last couple of weeks. I mean, you really know that Rico Dowdle is going to be the running back number 1 there. Zeke has fallen down to number 4. I think they brought up Dalvin Cook to be the number 2 or change of pace running back. And then Deuce Vaughn is holding steady at running back number 3 for the Cowboys. Questions about CeeDee Lamb and whether or not he was going to play this week. It looks like he is going to start. Cooper Rush is a viable backup quarterback, which is why the Cowboys did not let him go in the offseason and decided to re-sign him. If you're unlucky, you'll get Trey Lance in there, and he'll blow something for you as well. But I do like Jalen Hurts here, even though Philadelphia has the opportunity to get up big, get up fast. Obviously, they've got Saquon Barkley, and it sounds like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are both going to play, and Dallas Goedert is going to play as well. So they've got a lot of offensive weapons there. They could get out to a big lead and then run the ball. Well, it's Jalen Hurts. Dallas gives up the 6th most total yards per game, the 2nd most points allowed per game. I always look at the total yards because even if it's something where, hey, you're running the ball very well or you're passing the ball very well, you're going to be in the end zone. You're going to be in the red zone quite a bit. Jalen Hurts killed me a couple of times this season already with the tush push. They get down to the 1 yard line. Maybe there's a pass interference call in the end zone, that it's goal, 1st and goal from the 1, and they're going to tush push it in and not give it to Barkley. You can't count out Jalen Hurts, which is why he's 6th in fantasy football for quarterbacks right now. So definitely still start Jalen Hurts. I see a big week coming for him. And then my third must start on the week for week 10 is going to be Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is currently sitting at about the 9th or 10th spot for fantasy football quarterbacks. They're playing at Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay, again, I'm going to go to this stat. Tampa Bay gives up the 3rd most total yards per game, the 3rd most passing yards per game, and the 5th most points allowed per game. So there should be quite a bit of scoring in this game between Tampa Bay and San Francisco. Plus, Brock Purdy's coming off the bye week. It sounds like Debo should be ready to go. He's had 2 weeks off. Even though he's still listed as questionable right now with the ribs and everything, I can't imagine that San Francisco actually holds him out of this game. They've had 2 weeks to recover. So keep that in mind. Sometimes I think these football teams, they label people as questionable or whatever as a strategic piece, like playing chess, where it's like, well, maybe they won't, believe that Debo is going to play this week or whatever it is. Also sounds like San Francisco is going to be getting Christian McCaffrey back. Who knows at what extent he will be playing, how many offensive snaps he'll be on the field for. But anything like that is going to help out Brock Purdy. I see a high-scoring game here as well. Tampa Bay is not going to, just because they've got Mike Evans out and Chris Godwin, they're not going to stop putting up points. They still have a very good offense in Tampa Bay. So Brock Purdy is my third must-sit for the week. And those are the three that I would expect to be in the top half a dozen, the top 4 or 5 for most points for quarterbacks on the week. So if you're having any doubts about them, definitely put those guys in for this week. Must-sits, and this is going to be a little bit controversial. I'm going to start with Bo Nix, who's not very controversial at all at this point. Yes, he is the 8th or 9th best quarterback in fantasy football, but they are playing against Kansas City, and Kansas City gives up the 4th fewest points per game and the 5th fewest total yards per game. So even for a running quarterback like Bo Nix, the field is not going to be that open. You've got a tough game in it, and hopefully I'm wrong. I really do hope that I'm wrong on this. I hope Kansas City comes out completely flat against the Denver Broncos. I hope Bo Nix ends up throwing 4 touchdowns this week and finally gives Kansas City a loss. But I don't think that that's going to happen. If it does happen, give me all the crap that you want to. I don't care. I'll be happy about it. But Bo Nix, I would probably leave him on your bench if you've got a better option out there. If not, good luck. My second must-sit is going to be Kyler Murray. I don't know what the problem is with the Arizona Cardinals right now. They were supposed to be a lot better team with Marvin Harrison Jr. in there. It's just not working out for him. Kyler Murray is really kind of a boom or bust type of a quarterback right now. I'd keep him on your bench until further notice, really, which is sad because he's the 7th or 8th best ranked quarterback in fantasy football leagues coming into week 10. Going against the New York Jets. The Jets defense is for real. I know that they had a couple of games that, they didn't look like the New York Jets defense that they were supposed to be. Hassan Riddick is back playing in there again. So you're going to have more pressure on Kyler Murray. He doesn't seem like he's making the best decisions yet. If you heard me in the beginning of the season before we even really got into the season, Kyler Murray, not one of my favorite quarterbacks. I don't think he's going to make it that much farther in the NFL as a starting quarterback. Doesn't seem to make the best decisions out there. And I don't think he's fooling anybody at this point. So versus New York, who gives up the second fewest passing yards per game. This is really going to hurt Marvin Harrison Jr. owners as well, who, again, he's been a boomer bust based off of what Kyler Murray has been doing. And the Jets also give up the 4th fewest total yards and the 10th fewest points. So it is a very strong defense that they're going into. And let's face it, Arizona does not have a very strong offense. Here's the controversy with my must sits, and it's my third one. I waited until the third one intentionally just to give this to you. Jayden Daniels, currently number 3 or 4 overall for quarterbacks as a whole coming into week 10 versus Pittsburgh. And this is where you have to look at the matchups. You have to start to play the matchups a little bit more. Pittsburgh gives up the 9th fewest total yards per game and the 2nd fewest points allowed per game. Keep in mind one thing, and I love Jayden Daniels this year. He's fantastic. They've had a relatively easy schedule for the most part, and I'm just going to pull that up just to give you an idea. The Commanders are 7-2, but they've faced opponents who have a collective record of 32-50. That's a .390 winning percentage, and by the way, it's the 3rd easiest schedule in the NFL strength of schedule to date. So while Jayden Daniels has been playing well, he's playing well against very bad teams. So I wouldn't take the risk if you've got somebody else that you can play instead of Jayden Daniels at this point in time against Pittsburgh, against that defense. I would go ahead and look for it. Plus, Brian Robinson Jr. is still out. So you've got your best running back not back there either. It hurts me to say it because I've got Terry McLaurin in one of my best leagues here. I'm really hoping for a big game. I think what's going to happen in this one in particular, Pittsburgh's going to get out to a lead. Russell Wilson looks really good at this point in time. They added another weapon at wide receiver in Mike Williams. I think that really starts to click, and Pittsburgh gets out to a lead, and they shut down the run on the Washington side. This is going to be a wake-up game for Jayden Daniels. I'm a big believer. I think he'll put up some decent points, maybe somewhere around 13, 14, 15 points. It's a mediocre type of a game, but it could go south real quick for him, especially with Watt, who's looking like the defensive player of the year. That defense just looks too strong to really start Jayden Daniels hands down this week. If you're looking for a couple of different options, who I think are going to be some sleepers for this week, my first sleeper that I like the most is Sam Darnold with Minnesota. Currently ranking at 14 to 16th in fantasy football leagues, depending on the format that you're in, playing at Jacksonville. And Jacksonville gives up the 2nd most total yards per game, the 2nd most passing yards per game, the 3rd most points allowed per game. So I think this is going to be a really big game for Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings to go in there. They're not going to rest on their laurels, so to speak. If you watch the Minnesota games in the past, even when they've gotten out to a lead, I think they had a 25-point lead or something like that against the Green Bay Packers. They almost lost that game. They're going to kind of be like the Detroit Lions here, where they're going to put up as many points as they can. They still got Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson is going to turn around. I know he didn't have a very impressive week last week, but he will, because the Jacksonville defense is really going to focus on shutting Aaron Jones down. So I would say Sam Darnold, big-time sleeper for this week at Jacksonville. I think he's got the opportunity to put up at least 2 touchdowns, and even that alone, that's going to put you with the yardage. It's going to put you somewhere maybe around 20-ish for this week. My second favorite quarterback this week as a sleeper, and I know he hasn't done much, and this is going to be kind of a chance of a sleeper. I had somebody ask me earlier, they put out a poll. They said, should I start CJ Stroud? Should I start Caleb Williams? Or should I just accept my loss and move on to next week? And that's a great question. I actually opted for option number 3. I think you accept your loss and just go to next week and try to find a quarterback that's going to play well for you down the stretch. CJ Stroud is currently 16th to 18th as far as quarterbacks coming into week 10. Not great, not what people expected. But then again, you don't have your top two wide receivers in the game as well. They're going to have to focus a little bit more on the run, and they're going against Detroit, which is not going to work. Detroit is the highest scoring points per game team out there, so they're going to have to pass a lot. So as a sleeper, I like CJ Stroud because they're going to have to go pass heavy. The good news is that Detroit gives up the fourth most passing yards allowed per game, so it's not going to be an impossible task for CJ Stroud. He should be able to get some points out of this, so look for him. And this game is also the third highest over-under of any of the NFL games. So even the experts are expecting this to be a very high-scoring game on both sides. So CJ Stroud, let's look for him to be a sleeper. I think he'll finish in the top 12 this week. My third sleeper for the week, and this name is going around, and it is hilarious to even think about, seeing as how they started the season this year, is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is somewhere between 18th and 20th for fantasy quarterbacks, but he's had a couple of really good weeks in there. And again, you got to play the matchups. So when you're looking at this, they're going against Carolina. Carolina gives up the most total yards per game, and they give up the most points allowed per game. Now, the worry here is that the Giants are going to get out to such a big lead that they're just going to give it to Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary, and they're just going to run away with it. I don't think that happens before Daniel Jones gets his points. And let's not forget, Daniel Jones can run too. So this team that gives up the most total yards per game, even if he gets flushed out of the pocket, I don't think that there's a worse team out there that stops a quarterback in this kind of a situation. So if you're hurting, if you've got a quarterback that's on bye this week, go ahead, take a shot with Daniel Jones for 1 week at least. This is probably the best matchup that he's ever going to get. I would anticipate he gets somewhere between 20 and 25 fantasy points this week as well. So moving along from the quarterbacks, let's get into the running backs. And again, I mentioned it before. When we talk about the running backs, I break it down between the running back 1 and the running back 2. So the running back 1s, these are the guys that are in the top 12 already. You're not going to not start one of these guys as either a running back 1, running back 2, or in your flex option. I'm merely saying that these guys have the best opportunity to put up the maximum points that they possibly can for this week. And it's going to be a no-brainer. We talked about this game already with Jalen Hurts. I like Jalen Hurts. I like Saquon Barkley even more. He's ranked 3rd for running backs right now. This is a no-brainer versus Dallas. They give up the 2nd most points per game, the 3rd most rushing yards per game, the 6th most total yards per game. Plus, as I mentioned before, Dallas is without Dak. How long is CeeDee Lamb going to play in that game if he gets re-injured again? Barkley scored 31 points the last week and is averaging 23 points over the last 3 weeks. So this can be your stud of the week, especially if it's, if you went up against Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or any combination of them. This is going to be a guy who could very well get you back into your week after being down 75 points with 2 guys playing. So Saquon Barkley is my number 1 must start. Number 2 is Bijan Robinson. This guy's been on a roll as well. He's 4th overall, and what a breath of fresh air after his slow start in the beginning of the year. Everybody was starting to wonder, what's going on with him, and he's ranked 18th to 20th as far as running backs. He's really come on lately, and it looks like this running back by committee in Atlanta is pretty much over unless they start running up the score and Bijan gets 20-plus points to begin with. So you've got Bijan, he's 4th overall, going up against New Orleans, who allows the 5th most total yards per game, the 7th most points allowed per game, and the 8th most rushing yards per game. The total points is important here because Bijan catches a lot out of the backfield. I think he was targeted the most last week, and he also had the most receptions out of anybody on that team. So got to keep Bijan in there. He's a must start all the time. He's been on fire the last month, putting up 18-plus points per game in the last 4 weeks. So got to have him in there, keep him in there for sure. My third one, here's my 3rd must start, and he falls, and it's amazing. I didn't think he was going to be in the top 12 for fantasy points this year or right now before week 10. And this is, of course, in a 0.5. We're talking about the standard 0.5 PPR. Devin Achane from Miami. So they got Tua back, which is a big plus. But Achane actually is 11th overall for running backs, and he's going up against the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams give up the 9th most total yards and the 9th most rushing yards per game. Achane has put up 23-plus points in the last 2 games, and I don't see that slowing down at all. as Tua seems to still be getting comfortable after the last 2 games. He put up some decent points there. Wide receivers don't seem to be a thing in that offense. Here's the nice thing about that game. The Rams and the Dolphins, this should be another very high-scoring game. Let me just check that out for you real quick and see what the current over-under is. For the Dolphins-Rams, that is a 49. And that's got to be, again, maybe the second or third highest over-under for a football game this week. So definitely put Achane in. He seems to be getting the boatload of points here. He can catch passes out of the backfield as well. So definitely, obviously, in a half PPR league, you're going to want to start Achane in there. Do not hesitate. There was a lot of people hesitating on him a few weeks ago. The hesitation can be over. Now, as we talk about halfback or running back number 2s, and these are the guys that are ranked from 13 to 24. Here's your must starts with this group. And my first one, I mentioned it before, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is currently 18th for fantasy football running backs, and he is at Jacksonville, which we talked about before. They give up the second most total yards per game, the third most points allowed per game. Aaron Jones is going to get his props, whether it's catching passes out of the backfield or just flat out running it into the end zone. Aaron Jones is going to be a very favorable person if there is that chance that Minnesota does start to run away with this game in Jacksonville. If Mac Jones is a starting quarterback, that could very well be the case. He's going to get a lot of points for being an RB2 at this point. My second one, DeAndre Swift. And I think people have overlooked him because he's on Chicago, and Chicago's been kind of hit or miss lately. But DeAndre Swift is 17th overall for fantasy running backs, and he's going up against New England this week. New England gives up the 7th most rushing yards per game and the 8th most total yards per game. DeAndre Swift can catch passes out of the backfield too. So plus, Swift has put up 5 weeks of double-digit points, with 4 of those 5 weeks being 19 points or higher. This guy's flying under the radar for some reason as an RB2, and he's been an RB1 for the last month plus. So definitely keep DeAndre Swift in your lineup. I can't say the same thing for the Chicago wide receivers, and that hurts me to say because I've got DJ Moore, and I've been waiting for him to do something similar to last year, which he has not done. I think all of their wide receivers, you can kind of put them on hold for now. I wouldn't trust any of them and go directly to DeAndre Swift. I think that's what Caleb Williams is going to do. Oh, and by the way, the schedule for the Chicago Bears is going to be a lot more difficult coming down the stretch here. So expect DeAndre to maybe catch a few more passes out of the backfield. They don't have Khalil Herbert anymore. They traded him to Cincinnati last week. Not that he was a big factor, but that just shows you the confidence that Chicago has in Swift. My third one this week, watch this one. I like Jordan Mason. I still like Jordan Mason. Every time that a team has come out and said, oh, we're going to bring back this running back, we're going to bring back this wide receiver, it's always on a limited snap count. And I never like to go with these guys, first of all, even anybody. I don't care who it is. If it's Tua, if it's CeeDee Lamb, if it was somebody else that's hurt and they're coming back for the first week afterwards. And we saw this a little bit, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. They can either blow up or they can completely crap out, right? So TJ Hawkinson, everybody was waiting for him to come back. You drafted him and you kept him on your bench, just waiting for that first game that he was going to come back, and he puts up 4 1/4, right? So I would take it easy on the CMC hype, and this is always my mindset, until you absolutely know what he's going to be doing, how many offensive snaps he's going to be in for, how much he's going to be playing in that offense. This is a game where San Fran, it should be a very high-scoring game, but if San Fran gets ahead, they're going to pull CMC early just because, like, okay, well, it's limited now. Sure, your Achilles, both calves seem to be fine, seems to be working out well, but I would still be cautious of him. I think Jordan Mason is still going to get the bulk of the carries for this week. It's a wait and see. I still like Jordan Mason against Tampa Bay, but watch for the CMC on this game, whether or not he's going to play or not, which it sounds like he is going to. All right, my 3 must-sits. Let's get into those. My must-sit number 1, and these are guys that fall within the top 30, right? So we've got Tony Pollard is 20th overall for running backs this year coming into week 10. They're at the Los Angeles Chargers. Could not be a worse matchup for Tony Pollard. The Chargers give up the least amount of points per game. They give up the 8th fewest rushing yards per game. Oh, and they give up the 8th fewest points per game as well. So let's sit this guy. Let's sit Pollard today. Plus, he has an injured foot that he's just come back from that he was nursing. And again, we're getting this quarterback switch up. It's not going to be Mason Rudolph anymore. They're going back to Will Levis, and Will Levis is not going to be, he's just not going to be that great. And again, it's the same kind of a scenario with, he's coming back from an injury. How good is he going to be? I think the defenses are going to hone in on the running game. They're going to shut down Tony Pollard. They're not going to play him very much. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm getting my teams mixed up here a little bit. Tony Pollard versus the Chargers here. Give me 1 second because I got to back up in what I'm saying. Tony Pollard for the Tennessee Titans. I don't know why I'm flaking out here all of a sudden. Will Levis is coming back as the quarterback. That's already been said. So I don't like Tony Pollard at all in this kind of a situation. It's not going to work out well for him. Number 2, Brian Robinson Jr., and I think he's actually out for this game. I think he was ruled out, Brian Robinson Jr. He's 24th overall. I'm going to throw Austin Eckler in there as well. I don't like the Jaden Daniels play. We already talked about that. I also don't like either Brian Robinson Jr. or Austin Eckler versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gives up the second fewest points per game, the fourth fewest rushing yards per game. Robinson will probably still be limited with a bum hammy as well. So you've got that. Brian Robinson Jr. not going to be a very safe play for anyone today. And number 3, Javonte Williams is 29th overall for running backs, going up against Kansas City. And Kansas City has one of the better run defenses, right? So you're not going to start anybody from the Denver Broncos. Javonte Williams, one of those guys that give up. Kansas City gives up the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game and the 4th fewest points per game. So those are going to be your 3 sits. If you're thinking about playing either one of those guys in your flex, I probably wouldn't do it at all. I would look for maybe one of these other individuals. You've got 3 sleepers. And I call these guys sleepers because they are outside of your top running backs, your top 24. If you're in a 12-person league, you look at the top 24 and you're going, okay, if I've got somebody in the top 12 and I've got somebody from 13 to 24, I'm doing pretty well. These guys fall outside of the top 24. They'd be great flex options, or if you want to stick them right into your running back too, you could probably do that as well. I like Tyrone Tracy. A lot of people do. He is currently 34th for running backs this year at Carolina. Gives up Carolina, who gives up the most total yards per game, the most rushing yards per game, the most points per game. Tyrone Tracy is going to be a big play, and a lot of people are asking about, is he going to be the play to go with for the rest of the year? Absolutely, until you get in playoff time. Look at that schedule. Going against, I think it's Atlanta and Baltimore, maybe not in that order. Maybe it is in that order, but you're going to have a contingency plan in that respect. I've got Daniel Jones as a sleeper this week. I've got Tyrone Tracy as a sleeper this week. They could really go off because of the matchup against Carolina. My second sleeper is going to be Rachaad White, who is currently 26th for running backs coming into week 10 versus San Francisco, who has we'll call it a mid defense as a whole. So keep an eye on if Bucky Irving plays or not with that bad toe. It sounds like he is going to play. So a lot of people are asking about Bucky Irving. Should I start Bucky? I wouldn't start Bucky. I don't think it's going to be a very good matchup. Toe injuries are usually... they don't just go away. And if he's been nursing this thing for the last couple of weeks, I don't think he's a very safe play at this point in time. If you're going to have one of these running backs going, I would say Rachaad White. But keep an eye on Bucky Irving. Sounds like he's going to play. But I think White is going to be the guy, and they're going to end up feeding him. You know how these NFL teams work. Anytime that somebody rolls their ankle or they show the slightest sign of being hurt, they take them out for the entire game. They don't tell people about it. Whew. And that's what happens. Here's my 3rd sleeper of the week. And a lot of people, I already said Dallas was probably going to get schooled this week, but I do like Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle is 33rd overall for running backs in fantasy football coming into week 10 versus Philadelphia, who only because Dak is out and they are going to have to run the ball. They are not going to rely on Cooper Rush. So he's going to get plenty of looks out of the backfield, whether it's passes out of the backfield, which he's caught quite a few of, or whether it's just flat out rushing yards. He's still the RB number 1 in Dallas, and they're going to have to put up points if they want to stay ahead of or keep up with Philadelphia Eagles this week. Sounds like Cook is the RB2 in Dallas. We saw how inefficient he was when he had his playing time. And then you've got CeeDee Lamb, who's, I believe, still questionable at this point in time. So really the whole team as an offense can't be trusted, but if you're looking for a sleeper, super sleeper, maybe Rico Dowdle would be your guy to go with as far as a running back. As we get into the wide receivers, same kind of concept here with the wide receivers, getting into the wide receiver ones. These are the guys that are in your top 12. They are the guys that you're going to play all the time. It doesn't really matter what the matchups are. But here's your top 12. Number 1, Justin Jefferson. Said it before. I like Sam Darnold this week. I think they're going to blow up, especially with the matchup with Jacksonville. They give up the second most passing yards per game. So how can you not go with Justin Jefferson? They also give up the third most points allowed per game. Justin Jefferson is a super freak. He could probably do the same thing as Jamar Chase. And who knows, maybe he's watching his buddy Jamar Chase and thinking, hey, I can do that same thing and want to put up 200 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. So let's look for the Jet, Justin Jefferson. Enough J's in there. He's going to be a no-brainer to start this week, and I think he might even catch Jamar Chase at that point. Number 2, Brian Thomas Jr. This seems to be a question. He's questionable. That's why it's a question, but he is 9th overall for fantasy football wide receivers versus Minnesota. On the other side, like I just said, Minnesota's going to put up some big points, so Jacksonville is going to have to counter. I don't care if it's Trevor Lawrence, if it's Mac Jones, or whoever. Minnesota gives up the 5th most passing yards per game. Plus, Jacksonville has rushing issues. They'll have to put up some big points somehow against Minnesota, and it might not come with Travis Etienne, who seems to be healthy at this point in time. Might be a kind of a split backfield between him and Bigsby. We don't really know yet, but I do like Brian Thomas Jr. if he plays. If he doesn't play, obviously I don't like him, but hopefully he's good to go. Go for BTJ all day. Number 3 is Drake London. I feel like I'm mentioning this guy a lot every week. Drake London is 5th overall for wide receivers. And again, this is if he plays, which it sounds like he's going to. Otherwise, I love Darnell Mooney. And Mooney is actually ranked 12th for wide receivers in fantasy football coming into week 10, which is unbelievable if you think about Drake being 5th and Mooney being 12th. That just goes to the testament of Kirk Cousins passing the ball around a lot. I've had a lot of questions on, do I start Kirk Cousins this week? Do I start Kyler Murray this week? I've got Tua this week. Kirk Cousins should be the hands-down guy. I mean, you can see from his wide receivers how often he passes the ball. What do you have, 3 touchdown passes last week as well? So do not sleep on Kirk Cousins. He is a solid contributor to that team, and especially against New Orleans, who seems to have a lot of problems going on right now. Who knows if offensively they're ever going to get back to the way that they were in the first couple of weeks. It certainly doesn't look like it, but they give up the 6th most passing yards per game and the 7th most points allowed per game. So I would definitely stick with Drake London in your lineup for sure. There's your wide receiver 1s. For wide receiver 2s, these guys are the guys between 13 and 24 in fantasy football on a 0.5 PPR league. And my first one is Devontae Smith, who is currently 17th overall. We keep talking about this game, but it is at Dallas if he plays, which sounds like he will be playing. Otherwise, A.J. Brown is your go-to guy for this game. Dallas gives up the 2nd most points per game, and the Cowboys are really back on their heels so far on the season. So this is going to be a make or break between them. Dallas might end up putting a lot of points on the board, but I just don't see it. This could be a knockout punch for Philly, which is why I like Devontae Smith a little bit more, because if they can go up and beat Dallas 45-14 or whatever it is, I think they continue to just pour it on and just beat the hell out of Dallas and make sure that they're feeling not great about themselves going into week 11 and kick them out of the playoffs, hopefully. Number 2 is Khalil Shakir, who is 24th overall going against Indianapolis, who gives up the 7th most passing yards per game. They give up the 4th most total yards per game. Plus, Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman are both working through some injuries. Keon Coleman has already been ruled out for this game, and Amari Cooper is still listed as questionable. Here's what I will say about Amari Cooper. Keep an eye on that one, but even if he does play, I would be weary about starting him in your lineup anyway. It's a wrist injury. How many times does a wide receiver need to catch a ball awkwardly, catch a ball and fall on the ground awkwardly, get tackled awkwardly? It's his wrist. If he re-injures the wrist, even if he starts during the game, he's not going to be very viable if he's out after the second quarter. So I would be concerned about Amari Cooper, which is why I think Khalil Shakir is a smart play this week for your wide receiver 2. Number 3, I mentioned Daniel Jones before as a sleeper. Malik Nabers, who's 14th overall in fantasy football for wide receivers versus Carolina. Again, they allow the most points per game, and they give up the most total yards allowed per game. So if Malik Nabers is looking for a bounce back or a little solidification in this offense, if the Giants really wanted to make it a statement game, both teams are 2-7. Who's the best 2-7 team there between the two of them? I think Malik Nabers gets his share of passes in this game, and he is a must start as well. Your must sit wide receivers for this week. I do not like Xavier Worthy. Now, Xavier Worthy is listed as number 44 overall for wide receivers versus Denver, who gives up the 4th fewest points per game and the 6th fewest passing yards allowed per game. Plus, Worthy was worthless last week. Worthy was worthless. -1 point. You'd have been better off keeping him on your bench than actually putting him in your lineup. He's had under 4 points 2 of the last 3 weeks. Since DeAndre Hopkins has been there, it's been him and the Travis Kelce show. They don't even need to pass the ball that much. They have a stellar defense, and they have Kareem Hunt in the backfield again. So, if anybody is catching passes, it might be Samaje Perine coming out of the backfield on 3rd downs. So he would even be a better play at this point than I think Xavier Worthy is. Xavier Worthy is a home run hitter guy, and that's it. So they might throw to him, 4 to 5 times per game and hope that he catches a big one and goes deep. This is the problem that I had with Xavier coming into and being drafted into the NFL as high as they were, with Kansas City trading up to get him. Yeah, the guy's fast. He ran the fastest 40 time at the combine ever. Big deal. Your defenses are going to tune into that. You're a one-dimensional kind of a wide receiver, and that's where he's at. So definitely sit Xavier Worthy this week. My second sit for the week is right after him, Calvin Ridley, and this kills me. I even had to ask about Calvin Ridley because I've got Calvin Ridley and Quentin Johnson. Which one am I going to start, right? Calvin Ridley is 45th overall. He's had a couple of good weeks. Keep in mind that he's had somebody else throwing him the ball beside Will Levis. They are at the Los Angeles Chargers this week. And they give up the 11th fewest passing yards per game and the least points allowed per game, which is why I don't like their running game either. 12.5 points is what they give up per game. It's not great. So not sure who the quarterback is going to be, but it sounds like it's going to be Will Levis. And if that is the case, it's a must-sit situation for Calvin Ridley. I think he digresses under Will Levis, who can't seem to find him anywhere. That whole offense does worse with Levis behind center than Mason Rudolph. My third must sit for the week, and I like this guy. He's a wide receiver 1. It's hard to say to sit a wide receiver 1 on any team, much like Calvin Ridley, but it's Demario Douglas, or for that matter, any wide receiver on New England. I would sit all of them against Chicago, who gives up the 8th fewest passing yards per game and the 5th fewest points allowed per game. If the Chicago Bears are smart, they give the ball to DeAndre Swift. They run the ball a lot. They control the clock. They keep New England off of the field. I love Drake May. I think he's going to be a great quarterback at some point in time. But Demario Douglas, even being a wide receiver 1, is not a wide receiver 1 on probably any other team in the NFL. So let's go ahead. Let's keep him on the bench. I don't think that they get much from him this week going against Chicago. If you are looking for some sleepers to replace one of these 3 sits, may I recommend Tyreek Hill? I think I might have said before, too, I recommended Tyreek Hill as maybe a sleeper or a must start, and he completely disappointed. And I might have said that I would never recommend him again. Well, if I did say that, I'm a liar. Tyreek Hill, 35th overall for wide receivers. So he is far outside of that. Should I start in my top 2 wide receivers? I would consider Tyreek Hill more of a flex spot at this point. They're playing at the LA Rams, which I said before is going to be a high-scoring game. And they give up the 9th most total yards per game, the 10th most passing yards per game, and the 11th most points allowed per game. So it would appear, or it would seem, that Tyreek Hill should be a beneficiary here. The Rams are going to put up a lot of points. They got Stafford back. They still got Kyren Williams in the backfield. You got Puka. You got Kupp. I don't know how you don't put up points with that offense. And the defense is kind of meh. So you've got Tyreek Hill back there, and I think that they're going to have to throw it to him. They're going to need some big plays from him. I think Tyreek Hill has probably the best week of his fantasy life this week, or fantasy year, I should say, in 2024 here. But I do like Tyreek Hill as a sleeper. My last sleeper that I'm sorry, I didn't get into my second one. My second sleeper, Deebo Samuels versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay gives up the 3rd most passing yards per game, allows the 5th most points per game. And if CMC comes back, which it sounds like he will, it will open up the passing game. The only other question mark that you have to continue to follow, I know because I've got Deebo on one of my teams, he's still in my lineup, is he is questionable with that rib injury or the illness or whatever happened 2 weeks ago. They've had 2 weeks off. I think this is a ploy to get Tampa Bay to maybe not focus on him or to think about other things, cross their fingers, knock on wood, and hope that they don't have to go up against Deebo Samuels. But I think that they're going to have to. Deebo is a sleeper play this week. He should be in your starting lineup for sure if he plays, but keep an eye on that. I think they are a noon game this week, so definitely wake up early, pay attention. And my last sleeper this week is going to be Tank Dell. I already mentioned CJ Stroud was one of my sleeper quarterbacks. Tank Dell, I think he has not blossomed yet this week, and what a better opportunity to do so than against Detroit. And I mentioned it before, Detroit is going to put up a lot of points because that's what Detroit does. They put up the most points per game than any other team in the NFL, but they're fourth in passing yards allowed per game, which means Houston should be able to throw the ball a little bit easier than in the past weeks. Tank has put up 11.5 points in 3 of the last 4 games. So it's not a terrible play to think about Tank Dell here. I think he can still be a viable flex option for you, or if you're really desperate for wide receivers, maybe you stick Tank Dell in there. But he is my third sleeper for the week. Let's move along to the tight ends. As a must start, George Kittle first in tight end points so far coming into week 10, going up against Tampa Bay, and I could not beat this one enough. We talked about Deebo Samuels just a few minutes ago. Tampa Bay gives up the 3rd most passing yards allowed per game to tight ends and the 5th most points allowed per game in general. So George Kittle should be a no-brainer here. And again, do we know if Deebo is going to play? Do we know how much CMC is going to play? George Kittle is going to be a factor in this one. I think they utilize him quite a bit. Number 2 is Hunter Henry. Now, while I mentioned Drake May is not going to have a very good game, Demario Douglas not going to have a very good game, Hunter Henry is going to be the dump off. They're going to have to pass. They're just going to have to against Chicago. They've got to get something going. I think Hunter Henry here is the beneficiary here against Chicago, simply because I think the Bears are going to shut down the deeper passing routes against Drake May. And if you do that, they're going to have to dump it off. Hunter Henry is, again, he's going to be the beneficiary. And by the way, he's 8th overall for fantasy football tight ends. So I would definitely stick with him. And my third tight end to start is Cole Kmet on the other side there. Cole Kmet is 10th overall for fantasy tight ends, going against New England, who gives up the 13th most passing yards to tight ends in general and the 12th most passing yards allowed per game. Cole Kmet, I mentioned it before, DJ Moore is not getting it done. Keenan Allen's not really getting it done. Odunze, one of them has a good game or a decent enough game, and it's like a rotisserie chicken. It just keeps on rolling over. But Cole Kmet has actually been the one solid receiver on the Chicago Bears this season. So definitely go with those 3 if you've got them in your lineup. Here's 3 guys you absolutely shouldn't go with. I mentioned that I did not like Kyler Murray this week. I also do not like Trey McBride this week either. He is 4th for fantasy tight ends, so it's almost like, yeah, you have to start him. It's a must start. You got to go with who's getting you points, but it's versus the New York Jets. They give up the 6th fewest points to tight the 6th fewest yards per game to tight ends, and the 2nd fewest passing yards overall. So I don't see a real big game here for McBride. The Jets do a really good job at shutting down that tight end dump-off pass offense from their opponents. Number 2 is going to be Sam Laporta. As much points as I think that they are going to score, per usual, it has not consisted of Sam Laporta, who is currently 15th overall for tight ends in fantasy coming into week 10, versus Houston, who gives up the fewest yards per game to tight ends. And they also give up the 3rd fewest passing yards overall per game. So Sam Laporta not going to be a big factor in this one. And it's hard to say that, but I've been right about it so many other times that I just feel the need to kind of beat that with a stick. Sam Laporta, 15th overall, going against a team who doesn't allow much to tight ends. So keep him on your bench if you've got another alternative to put in there. My third must sit on the week, Jake Ferguson. 17th overall for tight ends coming into week 10 versus Philadelphia, who gives up the 4th fewest yards per game to tight ends. And you got Cooper Rush in there again. So we can't, go over this any more times than what we currently have already. This is going to be a do or die game for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles make it a die game, and they take the Dallas Cowboys' pride. They take their will, they take their soul, they take everything from them. Nobody has a very good week on the Dallas Cowboys this week, except for maybe Rico Dowdle if you need him as a sleeper. But otherwise, I would keep Jake Ferguson on your bench as a must-sit. In place of Laporta, Ferguson, or McBride, I would recommend one of these 3 individuals, starting off with Jonnu Smith from Miami, currently 18th overall for tight ends coming into week 10 versus the LA Rams, who I mentioned before. They give up a lot of points. This game is the 3rd highest over-under for the week, so even the experts are predicting that this is going to be something of a shootout here. The Rams give up the 6th most passing yards per game to tight ends. So keep that in mind. While Tua's getting his feet back underneath him and getting some starts in him, Jonnu Smith could be a very big beneficiary in this offense for the week. Number 2 is Dallas Goedert. Welcome back, Dallas Goedert. We're going to beat this one up too. Again, Philadelphia's got pretty much all their weapons back. They're going to take it to Dallas in any way, shape, or form. Dallas, wow, what a mess their team has become. But this kind of reloads with Dallas Goedert coming back. It reloads their entire offense. Saquon Barkley is healthy. A.J. Brown is healthy. Devonta Smith is healthy. So now you got Dallas Goedert back. Which one are you going to cover? I don't think they can cover all of them. I know they can't cover all of them. So Dallas Goedert, look for him. He's 21st overall for tight ends coming into week 10. I think that he's going to have a big week as well. And then my last sleeper of the week, and this guy's been hurt, and when he's back, he can put up some big games. He can put up nothing, but I like the versatility here coming from Taysom Hill, who's currently 25th among tight ends, but keep in mind that he is not just a tight end. And keep in mind that they're going against Atlanta this week. Atlanta's going to put up a bunch of points too. Atlanta, this game should be a higher scoring game than most of the other ones, and he'll put up 14 points for the second time in just 5 games played this year. Like I said it before, he hasn't played in a lot of games, but when he does, he's got that option to play tight end. He's got that option to play quarterback. They could put him in the backfield. They could put him at wide receiver. So if you're looking for somebody this week to fill in for maybe Brock Bowers, who's not playing, Taysom Hill, Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goedert, if they're available, go snatch them up and put them in your roster for tight end. Moving along to defenses at this point, here's your must-start top 3 tight ends that I like for this week. Number 1 is going to be the LA Chargers. We mentioned this before, versus the Titans. The Titans are going to have Will Levis back in as their starting quarterback. Don't think I like that very much, and I wouldn't like it if I was a Tennessee Titans fan. But the Chargers give up an NFL best 12.5 points per game, and Tennessee scores the 6th fewest points per game at 17.5. This does not bode well for the Titans on any level whatsoever. If they scored 12.5 points this week, I think it would be amazing if they could actually do that. If they kicked 4 field goals, I think that's about all that they're going to end up doing against the Chargers this week. So definitely go out and get the Chargers, play them, put them in your starting lineup. Second team that I like the most is the Chicago Bears. I mentioned this before versus the Patriots. I don't think anybody on the Patriots has a good game except for maybe Hunter Henry, who might get a bunch of dump-off passes. If you're in a half PPR or a full PPR, Hunter Henry could be the beneficiary this week if you're looking for a replacement or a guy. He's a top 10 tight end anyway, so you should be having him in your lineup. But the Bears give up the 5th fewest points per game at 18.5, and the Pats score the 3rd fewest points per game with 15.5. So again, looking at those matchups, it's a great defense against not a great offense. I can't help but to think, Chicago Bears are going to be one of the better teams this weekend, putting up a lot of points, helping out your fantasy team. Third must start for the week is going to be the LA Rams. And now I mentioned this one before, that this is going to be a high scoring game. The Rams defense, though, has scored 12.5 fantasy points per game over the last 3 weeks coming off of their bye week. So they're doing it by scoring touchdowns. They're getting safeties. They're getting all this stuff, right? They're getting to the quarterback. They're getting sacks, and they're getting interceptions. So this isn't something where we're going to talk about how few points that they're going to give up to Miami. This is about how many points they're actually going to get, how many points they're going to attain via fumble recoveries and interceptions and touchdowns and special teams and all that fun stuff. So a little bit different viewpoint from the Chargers versus the Titans and the Bears versus the Patriots. But I think the Rams end up just putting up points. And Tua, it being his 3rd game back, maybe he's not as sharp and they hone in on him. Just saying, I like the Rams. They actually go out and get points rather than shut down another team's offense. So here's my must-sit defenses for the week. And my first must-sit is the Indianapolis Colts. This should be a no-brainer, although the Colts are ranked 12th overall in fantasy coming into week 10. They're going up against Buffalo, who scores the 4th most points per game. Are they going to have Amari Cooper? They already don't have Coleman in there, Keon Coleman. I don't think that matters too much. The way that the Colts came out very lackluster last week against Minnesota, Joe Flacco just seemed off. I don't think the Colts have a whole lot going for them at this point. They're now not considered to be a playoff team. They wouldn't make it if the playoffs started this upcoming week. Buffalo might not have Amari Cooper in there, but if he does, it's definitely going to be a boost to the Buffalo Bills. And I wouldn't start the Indianapolis Colts. There's better options out there. Second team that you should sit, mention these guys too. The Houston Texans are currently 11th overall, believe it or not, for fantasy football defenses. Again, depending on what your format is that you're playing in. Versus Detroit, who score the most points per game. Again, they score the most points per game. I would have said the same thing, about the Cincinnati defense and the Baltimore defense. Neither one of those was a very good one. And boom, there you go. They gave up a combined 60-something points between the two of them. But Houston, we have a problem. They're not going to be able to shut down this Detroit team. They're just not that good. Despite being 11th overall, I would find somebody else. And here might be a controversial one because I talked up the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I just said that Jaden Daniels wasn't a very good start. I would still sit the Steelers. Even though they are coming off a bye week, they have not faced an offense like the Commanders yet, who have scored the third most points per game. And I think it neutralizes a little bit what Watt and the Steelers normally do. Now, the Steelers are ranked 6th overall for fantasy football quarterbacks, for fantasy football defenses, getting ahead of myself. But when you take a look at the teams that they have faced, the Steelers are 6-2. They've faced opponents that are 30-40. That's a 428, 429 winning percentage, which puts them at the 28th toughest, or if you wanted to say the 4th easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. That's maybe why they're a number 6 defense in fantasy. Now they're going up against a high potent Washington Commanders offense, and I get that they don't have Brian Robinson in there. They really become kind of one-dimensional. If Chicago can cover Terry McLaurin, I think this becomes a really ugly game, but they're also obviously going to have to cover Daniels taken off. And I think Watt kind of covers that as well. So could be an ugly game. That's going to be my just kind of maybe think about something else if you've got it. But I said it before too. Jaden Daniels, he's a rookie. He's going to make some mistakes. Maybe he gets too much pressure on him. But so far, he's looked pretty outstanding. Here's my sleepers. If you're looking at sitting any one of the top 3 teams that I just said, the Steelers, the Colts, and the Texans, here are some teams that you could look out for. Number 1, and this is kind of a no-brainer, the New York Giants. The New York Giants are ranked 13th overall, so they're not considered in that top 10 right now, versus Carolina this week because the Panthers are just terrible. In the last 2 weeks, they've given up 2 wide receivers and they scored the league's 4th fewest points per game. So I just look at this and I go, there's no way that the Giants can screw this up, right? Daniel Jones has been playing better. Malik Neighbors is back. They've got Tyrone Tracy going off. I don't know how you don't start the Giants this week against Carolina because they got Bryce Young back in there. They got Xavier Legette and somebody else, and it doesn't really add up to anything. So definitely go out and get the Giants if they're still available, if you're starting to feel a little weary about who you've got in your starting defense. Second defense that I would start, I've mentioned this before too, you can't go wrong with starting anybody on Philadelphia this week. Philadelphia is the 20th ranked defense this coming into week 10 versus Dallas, who is without Dak Prescott. Lamb is banged up. They're starting Cooper Rush. Their running game isn't solid to begin with. This is a game where Philadelphia can get ahead quickly with Saquon, with AJ, with Devonta Smith, with Goddard coming back, with Jalen Hurts. Sorry. This is a game where Philly can really take control, put Dallas up against the ropes, knock them out, get turnovers, go for the ball a lot, and not have to worry about it. So Philadelphia should be putting up some big points this week. My third sleeper defense this week is the New York Jets versus Arizona. The Jets finished 4th overall last week in fantasy points on their defense. I think that's a big thing. It's a big, how do you do after coming off of a couple of bad losses? And they said, hey, you know what? We're just getting started here. They got Hassan Riddick back coming to practice, and he's playing again. But they finished 4th overall last week in fantasy points, and they are 10th in the NFL for points allowed per game. On the other side of the ball, you've got Arizona there, who's been inconsistent at best. Kyler Murray is inconsistent. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been boom or bust. So you've got a lot of these kind of unfortunate things happening with the Arizona Cardinals. And there you go. So tell you what, though, I do want to take some time right now, and I want to get into answering some questions that we've got. So let's get into that. Give me 1 second to pull up all of these new questions. Dun-dun-dun. This is where I need my own theme song in here. All right, questions. All right, and here we go. Do we want to start Hurts versus the Cowboys or Daniels versus the Steelers? Wow, that's funny. We just talked about that one. I think the Cowboys are a mess right now, obviously. Hurts will have his way with them. Yes, they probably get up big in that game. I still see Hurts being able to throw and run versus them boys. Daniels is not a terrible play, but it is the Steelers defense. He is a rookie in there. It's going to be the hardest defense that he's gone up against. He's had some really cushy ones. So I feel like Daniels could struggle. So if that's if you've got both those guys, Hurts and Daniels, I would definitely go Hurts in this situation. Daniels will probably, you can't even really say that he's going to be playing from behind. I just don't like the defense that they're going up against. The Steelers defense is great, really, until further notice. So I would watch out for that one. Which wide receiver in a non-PPR? Got Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton, and Juwan Jennings. Wow, those are some good ones. I like those. So I think here, out of those three, I think you have to go Jennings, especially with Amari Cooper still being designated as injured. And I mentioned it earlier in the show as well. It's a wrist injury, right? So, who's to say that he's not, pushing off of a guy and he tweaks the wrist, or he catches a ball and he tweaks the wrist, or he falls after making a catch and he tweaks the wrist, or he gets tackled. And I just don't like the fact that the designation is so late in the week. They're still thinking about whether or not he's going to play or not. If he does play, he could go down early, and I just don't like that. Sutton against Kansas City, I already kind of talked about that. I think Denver's going to have to pass the ball, which makes Sutton a very viable thing. It's a non-PPR. That's a tough one. Going up against Kansas City, though, I would love to see, and I mentioned this before, I hope I'm wrong about Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos this week. I hope they just absolutely destroy the Kansas City Chiefs, give them their first loss. It being within the same division, that would even be better. But I do like Jennings here, even though Debo is still considered questionable. I think he might get a little bit more of a look there, especially if Tampa Bay wants to focus on Debo and if CMC is in the game. I think Jennings is a solid wide receiver number 2 in that offense, and he could be a number 1 in that offense if Debo doesn't play as much. So could be limited with Debo. Keep your eyes on that one, though. But I do like Jennings in that format. All right, let's get to another one here. Do we like Ladd McConkey versus Tennessee, or do we like Rachaad White versus the Niners? I like both. Ladd McConkey with the Titans, they give up the most points in the slot, or most receptions or something like that. The Titans can't cover the slot very well. And so Ladd McConkey becomes he goes from a number 1 to a number 2, right? Because Quentin Johnston wasn't in there. Ladd McConkey was playing as the number 1 guy. I think he's a much better number 2. So I think that he could get a lot of catches there. But again, it's against the Titans, who I don't think are going to put up a lot of points. Therefore, the Chargers kind of go back to being that run-first offense. Ladd McConkey could be the beneficiary of that, and getting the short passes. It's a half PPR, okay, versus Rachaad White and the Niners. Rachaad White, if you saw anything with the running backs in Tampa Bay, they are catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. I think I like Rachaad White just a little bit more in this kind of a situation because of the fact that Tampa Bay has been throwing to their running backs. Plus, I know Bucky Irving is listed as ready to go, but it's a toe injury. And I don't like those toe injuries. They always seem to flare back up on players. So not a big fan of that. So I think Rachaad White's going to get more looks at running back. There's no real need to put Bucky Irving in there. So I think Rachaad White over Ladd McConkey in that situation. I like that a little bit more. So I would go with him. All right, we got George Pickens in a PPR. George Pickens versus Deebo Samuel. I tell you what, easy answer. This should be Deebo, right? Hands down. But you can't really trust Deebo with the injury designation. Tampa Bay, San Francisco, that should be a high-scoring game. People just thought that, when Godwin and Evans were hurt, that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of points being scored from Tampa Bay. So that's not the case, though. They proved that against Kansas City, got them into overtime. So they're still scoring points there. But Deebo Samuel versus George Pickens. George Pickens is a number one. They're going up against Washington. I just said that Washington hasn't seen a defense like this. Who knows how many points that they're going to put up. But again, you've got Russell Wilson, who's putting up a lot of points since he's been in there. Will the Commanders' defensive line and the run defense step up and shut down the running game of Pittsburgh? It should be Debo, but I just don't like the injury designation again this close to the start of the week. So I'm going to say George Pickens on that one over Debo. Next question, we've got Travis Etienne or Bucky Irving or Xavier Worthy. Well, I told you how I felt about Xavier Worthy. I don't like him at all. He put up -1 points last week. I think with the arrival of DeAndre Hopkins, you've got him and you've got the emergence of Travis Kelce again, who seemed to be asleep in the beginning of the year. They're a run-first team anyway with Hunt in the backfield. So I don't like Worthy. Take him out of the equation. And I already said my piece about Bucky Irving. Travis Etienne is fully healthy at this point in time, and I get that they're going to have possibly a different quarterback in there. We'll have to check on that because the last time that I saw, people are telling me that he's out, but he's still listed as questionable. I haven't seen officially where he's been out from any reliable source. But I do like Travis Etienne nonetheless. He's the running back number one. I think he's going to get the majority of the carries against Minnesota, and he catches passes out of the backfield as well. I don't like Bucky Irving with the toe injury. It has an opportunity to go really sideways on somebody very quickly. Bucky Irving, these guys that are coming in and there's still injury designations or, something a little bit more severe like that, with a toe, a running back, a wide receiver, anybody with a toe injury, they're planting all the time. They're hyperextending those toes. So I don't feel like Tampa Bay needs to use him with Rachaad White in there. So I'm going to go with Travis Etienne on that one. All right, need some help to start 2 wide receivers and a flex, non-PPR. So 2 wide receivers and a flex, non-PPR. You've got Hopkins, Cooper. I'm assuming Amari Cooper, but let me know if that's wrong. So we've got Hopkins, Cooper, Brian Thomas, Waddle, DJ Moore, Pearsall, McMillan, Bucky, Bigsby, or Mason. All right, there's a lot in there. I think your for sure guy that you're going to want in there, yes, Amari Cooper. Okay, so your for sure guy is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. I just mentioned it. It's DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce in that offense. And I think those are the 2 guys. I'm really hoping that Denver puts up a lot of points in there, so they're going to have to utilize Hopkins. So I like Hopkins the most out of that group. I'm not a fan of, and I've said it all show, I'm not a fan of Amari Cooper right now just because of the late designation. He's still questionable with a wrist injury, and I mentioned it before. He catches a ball wrong, or he pushes off the defender wrong, or he lands on it wrong, he gets tackled on it wrong, and he comes out of the game. So that's my only question there. If he was okay to play, if they really didn't have any iffy feelings about it, then they would have taken off the designation. So I don't like Cooper, although what a great time to have Cooper in there because it doesn't sound like or Coleman's going to be out too. So not him. I like Brian Thomas, number 2 here. The catch to that is that he is still questionable as well, and who's going to be throwing on the ball. So keep your eye on that because my no-brainers would be Hopkins and BTJ. But with BTJ still being questionable, I think even if they put Mac Jones in there at quarterback, I still like him because he's an amazing wide receiver, and you got to start your studs, right? Waddell, I don't see him as a factor really at all. He really has not done much. He's been really a non-factor. DJ Moore, I've got him on one of my favorite teams too, and I keep waiting for him. He's always been wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and so this week I moved him down to flex just because he hasn't done much, and I'm really starting to lose faith in Caleb Williams there. So I'm not sure if I like Caleb Williams with DJ Moore, but let's put, for now, DJ Moore at number 3. You've got Ricky Pearsall, and I think that's really going to come down to Deebo Samuels. If Deebo goes, then I would say no to Pearsall. But if he doesn't go, I like Pearsall as being the wide receiver 2 in that San Francisco offense with Juwan Jennings and potential of CMC being in the backfield, which it sounds like he's going to do. McMillan's another one. He's injured, right? He's a wide receiver 1. I think Tampa Bay is going to have to throw. So I do like McMillan as well. Again, if he goes, I would almost go McMillan over DJ Moore. I'd put McMillan in the flex. Bucky, I don't like this week, though, for Tampa Bay. The toe injury thing kind of scares me. Running backs always seem to re-injure that toe really easily. And Tampa Bay does not have to feed him because they've got Rachaad White. So I don't like the matchup there with Tampa Bay either. They should be able to put up a lot of points, but I think you're going to see more Rachaad White than Bucky Irving. Don't like Bigsby. ETN is fully healthy, and again, the quarterback issues there. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of play. Maybe if Jacksonville was going up against somebody like Carolina and they might run up the score and put Bigsby in a little bit more, I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with that one. And Mason, I love Mason this week. I really do. I think he's going to get more carries than CMC, but that's going to be a big question mark there, right? So how much is CMC going to play? And I hate that because up until the point when he actually plays in his first week back, you don't really know. So keep your eyes open on that one as well. But my for sure, Hopkins. If Brian Thomas goes, he would be my number 2. Otherwise, we're looking at McMillan maybe as your number 2 wide receiver. DJ Moore goes in there is probably, if, again, Brian Thompson doesn't go, I would go McMillan, DJ Moore, maybe in the flex. One in the wide receiver and one in the flex. But Mason, boy, keep your eye on that one too. Maybe Mason goes out. Maybe they designate CMC somewhere. Mason's a big one though. Give me 1 second here. I just want to see if there's anything new that I have about that whole scenario with San Francisco. Yeah, as far as I can see, Christian McCaffrey has not been, he's still listed as questionable. And if he doesn't go, Mason, put him right up to the top there and put him in your flex. And then I'd go Hopkins as a wide receiver, and then Brian Thomas, McMillan, and then DJ Moore. So that's what I would go. But yeah, Mason, if he doesn't go, I'd definitely start Mason if CMC can't go. Keep your eye on that one. And you're definitely welcome. All right. So another question here. We got Demario Douglas versus A.D. Mitchell. This is an easy one. Douglas all the way. As much as I just said that I don't like Douglas, I really don't, but he's a wide receiver 1. A.D. Mitchell is a wide receiver 4 at this point. So keep that in mind. And the only reason why the Indianapolis Colts wide receivers are even a factor at this point in time is because Joe Flacco is in there. Flacco didn't look very good at all last week. You're one Flacco going down to A.D. Mitchell not even being worth a roster spot. And at this point in time, you almost have to question if he's worth a roster spot right now too. So definitely start Pop Douglas in there. Get him in your starting lineup for sure. All right. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Rest of the season. I love these questions. Who's a better backup quarterback rest of the season? Is it Kyler Murray, Drake May, Flacco, or Daniel Jones? And that's a fun one to think about. I wouldn't say Flacco because you never know what's going to happen in that scenario. He came onto the team as a backup quarterback, so I don't think you can really trust that. If he has 1 or 2 more bad games, I think they go right back to putting maybe Richardson back in. Drake May has a tough schedule ahead of him. Being a rookie, not having wide receivers out of there, I don't think that he would be a viable backup for the rest of the season. If you look at the schedules between Kyler Murray for the rest of the season and Daniel Jones, I think they both have really favorable schedules for the rest of the season. So I take into consideration though who's the better quarterback because their schedules are equal. Number one, look at whoever your starting quarterback is, and if you've got a tough a matchup with your starting quarterback, see which one is going to be favorable between the two of them, because I think that's going to be the big key there. But I get it. You've got him because in case your number one running back or your number one quarterback goes down, I would still go with Kyler Murray. He just has more upside. Daniel Jones has a very favorable schedule, but I think they're going to run more now that they've got, they've already kind of shown that it's kind of a 50-50 with the run game, pass game, but Tyrone Tracy has really taken off. And I don't think that they make a whole lot of guesswork or a lot of gambles. When they've got the lead in New York, they tend to run the ball. They're not going to pass it a lot. It's only when they get down a lot and then Daniel Jones blows up. But I like Kyler Murray as probably a backup for the rest of the schedule there. All right, here's another one. Had Chase, Brown, and Andrews on Thursday. Should I start or sit the rest of my team? Oh, shit. That's a good one. Hell, you might as well. You had, oh, my God. You had Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, and Mark Andrews on Thursday. Holy man. I'm glad I wasn't playing you. That is sick. You are a sick man. No, good job, man. I think you can consider that a win. And I don't know. At this point, I don't know if your league rewards people for high score of the week, but I would see whoever's got the best ceiling at that point and try to get high score of the week just for bragging rights if I were you. Wow, that's amazing. Good deal. Glad I don't have you in my league. All right, here's another one. Bucky Irving, Travis Etienne, or Keenan Allen. I've said my piece on Bucky Irving. Don't like the toe. Don't like the designation. They don't need to use him. They've got Rachaad White. So Bucky Irving, I would not feel safe playing at this point in time. Keenan Allen, I wouldn't feel safe playing him either. I've already kind of mentioned the merry-go-round there in Chicago. DJ Moore stinks it up, and then Keenan Allen stinks it up, and it's just the quarterback, right? Caleb Williams is not a very good quarterback at this point in time. He's not going to be able to spread the ball around. They've had a cushy schedule for the first half of the season, and now they're going into a hard schedule. I don't think he develops very well here. So for me, this is kind of a no-brainer with Travis Etienne. I get that he's going to have Mac Jones as his quarterback potentially, and they're probably going to end up falling behind to Minnesota, who's got a very potent offense, but it's an RB1. It's a clear-cut RB1 with Travis Etienne. It's not good overall, but I would go Travis Etienne and then maybe Bucky and hope for the best that he doesn't re-injure the toe, and then Keenan Allen in that one. All right, let's keep going. We got more questions here. So I've got wide receiver 2. Do I go with Downs, Mooney, and then in the flex, the other of the 2 that you don't pick, or Tyrone Tracy? I'm playing against my daughter who has Chase. Sorry to hear that. Already down 55 points. Yep. Yeah, I feel you. Here's the thing. I like Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney is probably the best wide receiver 2 in all of fantasy football. I'm sorry, in all of football, in just NFL in general. Fantasy football, he's definitely the best wide receiver 2 on a team because he's literally 12th overall in fantasy football points in a half PPR, which you didn't say whether or not you're in a half PPR or not, but I'm just going to assume a half PPR there. In a half PPR league, Mooney is number 12. So you can't not start Mooney over Downs. I kind of expressed already the, Indianapolis hopes there, but Mooney is by far a better play right now than Downs is. And then Tracy, yeah, for sure. He's got to go in your flex. I mean, they're playing Carolina, and I already beat the hell out of Carolina on here. You got to play Tyrone Tracy. He's an RB1. He's taking the spot away from Devin Singletary. That might be good enough with those 2 guys there. Mooney going up against New Orleans, and then Tyrone Tracy against Carolina. That could get you right back into that game real quick, depending on who your daughter has in that one. Good luck in that, but yep, for sure. I would go with those 2. All right, another question. We've got Brian Robinson Jr., Tyrone Tracy, or Javonte Williams. Yeah, Tyrone Tracy for sure. Brian Robinson Jr., I think he was listed as out unless I'm thinking of somebody else. Let me pull that up real quick. I don't want to give you bad information. Yeah, Brian Robinson Jr., he is out, so he's not even playing. So obviously that's a no-brainer, and then I would not start Javonte Williams versus Kansas City because he's going to have as much luck there as what Denver did against the Ravens run defense. Tyrone Tracy, hands down. I'm not sure who's been giving you other advice or what the question is, or maybe you just wanted some affirmation. But that is the definite route that I would go there. Full PPR, need one for flex. Pollard, Shakir, Harrison Jr., or Waddle. Well, Pollard or Marvin Harrison Jr., and I've said my piece on both of them as well. Cooper may play in Buffalo. If not Shakir, which, I've said before, maybe don't play Amari Cooper because of the injury, because it's a wrist. He can get hurt many different ways. He can come out of the game, which means Shakir would be a great viable option. So I'd watch on that one. If Cooper doesn't go, I would play Shakir. So go Shakir first if Cooper doesn't go. If Cooper does go, man, still not having Keon Coleman in there. He's a solid number 2. But you're talking about in a full PPR, Pollard, Harrison Jr. I'm not a fan of Harrison Jr. I think he's a boomer bust. I don't think the full PPR really becomes a factor at that point in time. I think Shakir, even with Cooper in there, catches more passes than Harrison Jr. does. So really, maybe it's between Pollard and Shakir. Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I would go Pollard first, then Shakir, unless Cooper is out. Then go Shakir, Pollard, Harrison, Waddell. I'd leave him in your rearview mirror at this point with the other ones. All right, so we've got a quarterback question here. Rodgers, Murray, Cousins, or Herbert? Well, sit Rodgers. Not a fan of him against. I know that they like to pass a lot now, but I think they're going to get up to a big lead against Arizona. So I'd put Aaron Rodgers on the bench. I like, I'll just say I like Kirk Cousins. I think the Chargers get out to a lead on this one, and they're going to start running the ball a little bit more, which means Herbert's not going to put up a lot of points. I would put him maybe 13 to 15 points, and if you're okay with that, then go ahead and start Herbert. But I like Cousins here. He's thrown a lot of touchdown passes recently, and he's probably, outside of Murray, the highest ranking one out of those remaining three. I like Kirk Cousins. I would start him this week against New Orleans. I think he's got the highest upside there. They seem to like to throw the ball quite a bit in Atlanta. Half PPR, start one, DeAndre Hopkins, Khalil Shakir, or Juwan Jennings. That's easy for me. I'm going to go Hopkins on that one just because of what I said about Amari Cooper. Maybe not playing the whole game. If he does play at all, he's still questionable. Shakir would be a solid number 2 behind DeAndre Hopkins, but they really only have DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce. And who knows? Maybe Denver puts up some points and they got to pass a little bit more, but I like D-Hop in this one for sure. Jennings is kind of a... Gosh, there's too many other weapons really in San Francisco right now. If Debo doesn't play and if CMC doesn't play, Jennings goes to a wide receiver 1 against Tampa Bay. You might have an argument there for Jennings, but I still like DeAndre Hopkins. And then again, Shakir. Tough situation now. Starts and then you got Debo starting like Hopkins.